When John Bolton attacked President Trump after the FBI raid, Vice President JD Vance fired back with a sharp response that shut him down instantly. The showdown between Trump's loyal VP and his outspoken critic quickly grabbed national attention. Yesterday began with shocking news. The FBI raided Bolton's Maryland home. Agents arrived before sunrise, pulling sealed boxes of documents from his property as stunned neighbors and eager reporters looked on. The raid immediately drew comparisons to the 2022 Mar-a-Lago incident. Sources claimed the case involved Bolton's 2020 memoir, The Room Where It Happened, which may have included classified material never cleared by the National Security Council. Evening, Bolton was furious. Instead of defending himself, he went live on television to attack Trump. His face was tense, his voice shaking with rage as he called Trump the dumbest man I ever worked for and a fascist dragging America into darkness. He claimed the raid was Trump's revenge, carried out by loyalists inside the FBI. Social media exploded. Hashtags like Nagashik Bolton raid and fascist Trump spread worldwide, and audiences gasped at the intensity of his words. Bolton wasn't done. Leaning into the camera, he declared that Trump didn't belong in the White House but in prison, accusing him of failing America and sliding the country toward authoritarianism. The studio fell silent, the host visibly stunned. Across the nation, people remembered how Bolton once stood at Trump's side, now watching him unleash bitter fury against his former commander-in-chief. At the White House, aides froze as the broadcast aired on every screen. Trump quietly shook his head and muttered, "Sad." But before he could speak, Vice President JD Vance stood, eyes fixed on the screen. "Enough," he said firmly. "This man is lying to the American people. He's hiding something, and I won't let him smear the president I serve." Within minutes, producers booked Vance live. The stage was set. The split screen came alive. Bolton red-faced with anger on one side, Vance calm and steady on the other. The contrast was striking, and the clash was about to begin. Bolton shook with rage, but Vance stayed calm, eyes sharp with conviction. He spoke without hesitation. "Mr. Bolton, you stand here acting righteous, calling President Trump a fascist. But the FBI raided your home because you've taken millions from foreign sources. And worse, you may have traded U.S. intelligence for profit," the studio gasped. The host's eyes widened as Bolton's lips trembled. Vance pressed on, his voice rising. "An FBI official confirmed to me this raid wasn't political. It's about your theft and mishandling of classified information. In 2020, you ignored the National Security Council's warnings and published secrets in your book. That is the truth." Each word landed like a blow. Bolton froze, silent for the first time. Across America, people leaned in. The tension was unbearable. Bolton clenched his fists, his face pale with fury. But Vance didn't flinch. His calm delivery carried more force than Bolton's shouting ever could. Phones buzzed across the country. People, texted, "Turn on the TV now." In bars, diners, and living rooms, conversations stopped. All eyes were glued to the clash. The host tried to step in, but Vance lifted his hand, commanding the moment. "Mr. Bolton, you call President Trump a fascist. Yet in 2022, when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago, you cheered. You called it justice. But when it happens to you, suddenly it's authoritarian. Which is it? You can't have it both ways." Silence filled the studio. Even Trump's critics nodded at the exposed hypocrisy. Bolton's lips quivered, but no words came. Vance leaned in, his voice lower but sharper. "This isn't politics. This is years of misconduct. Your memoir revealed secrets you had no right to publish. You put America's safety at risk to make money." Bolton's face drained of color. His eyes darted nervously as Vance continued. "Millions of dollars. That's what you gained from overseas while pretending to defend democracy. You mocked the president, but in truth, you betrayed America. Gasps echoed through the audience. The host leaned back in shock as social media exploded. Vance exposes Bolton shot to the top within minutes. Clips of the exchange spread like wildfire. Bolton tried to interrupt, but the crowd wasn't with him. Their silence was louder than his words. Visibly shaken, the once confident Bolton looked small under the lights. Vance pressed forward, voice steady with conviction. "Mr. Bolton, you swore an oath to protect this nation, but instead you endangered it. This isn't Trump versus Bolton. This is truth versus lies, justice versus arrogance." The audience erupted into applause, live on air. Even the host couldn't hide a faint smile. It was rare to see someone so completely undone live on air. Bolton's hand shook as he reached for water, his voice cracking as he muttered, "This is an outrage." But his words faded. The stage belonged to JD Vance now, the young vice president who had silenced one of Washington's fiercest critics with calm conviction. Across the country, living rooms buzzed. Some whispered, "I can't believe this is happening live." Others sat in stunned silence, watching the confrontation shift in real time. In Ohio, a veteran shook his head. Bolton always thought he was untouchable. But look at Vance, cutting through him like a knife. For men and women who had risked their lives protecting classified missions, the thought that secrets may have been sold was unbearable. Vance's words weren't just exposing Bolton. They echoed in the hearts of everyday Americans hungry for honesty. Families at kitchen tables spoke about loyalty, betrayal, and trust in leadership. Meanwhile, Bolton sat stiff, breathing hard, his silence louder than any defense. The producers signaled, "Let it play." America needed to see this. And America was watching. Then Vance's tone shifted. His voice softened, turning from sharp attack to heartfelt appeal. "This is bigger than politics," he said, looking straight into the camera. "Every soldier, every mother, every child deserves leaders who protect America, not sell it piece by piece." His words pierced living rooms nationwide. Mothers leaned closer. Fathers crossed their arms with pride. A student in Texas whispered, "He's not just talking about Bolton. He's talking about us." Bolton tried to answer, but Vance didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Mr. Bolton," he said steadily, "you pushed for wars that cost thousands of lives. And now, after betraying national security, you dare to call President Trump a fascist? That is hypocrisy of the highest order." The camera caught the audience, some wiping tears. The silence after his words was deafening. Bolton fumbled with his notes, dropping papers onto the studio floor. His broken reply, This is not fair," only deepened the damage. A woman shouted from the crowd, "Tell the truth!" Murmurs of agreement followed. Vance sat calmly, watching Bolton unravel without a smirk or gloat. He simply let the truth hang heavy in the air. Online, clips of the moment spread instantly, trending worldwide. Millions who hadn't planned to watch were now streaming the replay. Some moved to tears. Bolton slumped back, his confidence shattered. For the first time, he wasn't in control of the narrative. As Bolton sat frozen, Vance turned his focus to viewers at home. His voice carried the weight of disappointment. "Do you know what betrayal feels like?" he asked softly. "It's when the people you trust most turn their backs on you. Not for honor, not for country, but for money and pride." The camera zoomed in. His words weren't only about Bolton. They were about every American who had felt let down by leaders. In Washington, veterans wiped their eyes. Parents pulled children closer, whispering, "Listen to him." Bolton shifted uncomfortably, but Vance never looked his way. He was speaking to America. "Yesterday's raid wasn't revenge," Vance said. "It was accountability. And accountability. Accountability doesn't care about titles. It cares about truth." The words struck like a thunderclap. The studio audience stirred, some shaking their heads at Bolton, others nodding with Vance. The tension was thick, like a storm about to break. The host tried to step in. "Gentlemen." But no one was listening. All eyes were locked on JD Vance. Bolton's voice trembled as he tried to defend himself. This is an orchestrated attack against me." But his protest fell flat, drowned out by whispers. A young man in the crowd muttered, "You did this to yourself." Vance leaned forward sharper now. "You talk about authoritarianism, Mr. Bolton, but what's more authoritarian? Holding you accountable for breaking the law or letting you live above it while ordinary Americans pay the price?" The audience erupted in applause. The host sat pale, realizing this was no longer a debate but a reckoning. Bolton slumped back, defeated. Vance turned once more to the camera, eyes fierce yet sincere. "America has endured division, lies, corruption, but we cannot heal if the powerful keep escaping justice. There cannot be two sets of rules, one for politicians and one for everyone else." Viewers felt the weight of his words. In Michigan, a single mother wiped her eyes and whispered to her children, "He's fighting for us." Then came the line that sealed the night. Mr. Bolton called President Trump the dumbest man he ever worked for. But the dumbest thing any man can do is betray the country that gave him everything. And that's exactly what John Bolton has done. The studio erupted, clapping, crying, stunned silence. For Bolton, it was a breaking point. For Vance, a defining moment. Across America, families who planned to watch sitcoms found themselves glued to history, unfolding live. In diners, customers leaned closer to TV screens. At a rest stop, a truck driver replayed Vance's words on his phone, whispering, "This feels bigger than news. This feels like history." Meanwhile, on the studio floor, Bolton shifted uneasily, flushed and restless. He had expected cheers for attacking Trump, but instead the crowd had turned. Every camera caught his unraveling. Vance, steady and composed, spoke with the quiet authority of a man who believed in truth over politics. A weary nation listened, and, for the first time in years, many felt a flicker of hope. Then Vance's voice softened, carrying even greater weight. "Mr. Bolton, do you even understand what your actions mean to the men and women in uniform? When you mishandled classified information, you didn't just break rules, you endangered the lives of soldiers who rely on secrecy to come home alive. My grandfather fought in Korea. My friends fought in Iraq. None of them would forgive a man who risked lives for a paycheck." Vance's voice cut through the silence. Bolton looked down, unable to meet his eyes. Across the nation, veterans clenched their jaws, some wiping tears. A Marine father whispered to his wife, "Finally, someone is speaking for us." This was no longer politics. It was moral, deeply personal. The studio sat frozen, afraid to breathe. Vance hadn't shouted or insulted. He had spoken a truth too heavy for Bolton to bear. Bolton tried to reply, but nothing came. His lips parted, his hand shook, but his voice was gone. Cameras captured every second of his collapse. The host whispered, "We need a break," but producers refused. "Let it roll." Vance looked directly into the lens, eyes burning with conviction. "America is not a place for cowards, and it is not a place for traitors. We will stand tall, we will speak truth, and we will not be broken by men who sell our secrets." The audience erupted, clapping, crying, stunned. Bolton hadn't just lost an argument. He had lost the trust of a nation. Every major network cut into regular programming. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, all carried it live. Headlines flashed, "Vance confronts Bolton live, explosive clash shakes Washington." Coffee shops filled with debate. Some defended Bolton, but many praised Vance's courage. Everyone agreed this wasn't just another political spat, it was a turning point. Behind the cameras, producers whispered, "We've never seen anything like this." Social media nearly froze under the flood of clips spreading. By the second, Bolton sat crushed, staring at the floor. His fire was gone. He looked like a man broken by his own words. Vance, steady and unshaken, embodied something rare in politics: conviction without fear. The nation leaned closer. What would he say next? Turning to Bolton one last time, Vance's tone was grave. "You called President Trump a fascist. You called him dumb. But character isn't measured by insults. It's measured by loyalty, sacrifice, and protecting your people." He paused, letting the silence sting. "And what did you do, Mr. Bolton? You wrote a book. You cashed checks. You leaked secrets. You betrayed America." The words hung like a verdict. Some in the audience nodded, others wiped away tears. This was no longer about Trump. It was about right and wrong, about betrayal at the highest level. Bolton shook his head faintly, but stayed silent. His silence spoke louder than any denial. Phones lit up in every newsroom. Families called each other. "Turn on the TV. You won't believe this." Across towns and cities, people who rarely agreed on politics shared the same reaction: shock. Some cried openly, feeling as though a veil had finally lifted. Went to the White House, staff watched quietly. One aide whispered, "This might be Vance's defining moment." Even President Trump. In the Oval Office, President Trump leaned back, watching the broadcast. A faint smile crossed his face as he whispered, "That's my vice president." Back in the studio, JD Vance didn't bask in applause. He simply folded his hands, letting silence do the work. Bolton sat pale and slumped, his once proud posture reduced to defeat. The man who came to humiliate had instead been humiliated, and the nation had witnessed every second. Phones buzzed across America as clips of the clash spread. Some laughed at Bolton's collapse, but most felt something deeper, a mix of pride and sorrow. In Pennsylvania, a mother who had lost her son in Afghanistan clutched her chest as she whispered through tears, "Finally, someone is standing up for our kids." Across living rooms, quiet tears fell as Vance's words echoed, "We cannot have two sets of rules." Ordinary Americans, long weary of Washington's double standards, felt a chord struck in their hearts. Bolton sat frozen, hollow, as though the weight of his past decisions had finally caught him live on air. The host hesitated to cut to commercial, but no one dared interrupt. This wasn't just television. It was history unfolding. Vance leaned forward, his calm voice sharper than any anger. "You mocked the raid on President Trump's home in 2022. You laughed while his family endured humiliation. But now, when the FBI knocks on your door for real crimes, you cry foul. Mr. Bolton, this isn't hypocrisy. It is justice." Gasps rippled through the studio. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others nodded firmly. Vance's gaze stayed locked on Bolton. The law is not a weapon for the powerful. It is a shield for the people. And tonight, America sees who broke that shield. Bolton tried to protest, muttering, This is all lies." But the words were weak, drowned out by murmurs of rejection. His voice no longer carried weight. Vance leaned in once more, softer now, but devastating in finality. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. And right. Now, your silence says everything. The audience erupted. Applause, tears, even standing ovations. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was justice. Live on air. Social media overflowed with comments. "I'm crying right now. This just changed everything." Vance is America's voice. Bolton had come to bury Trump with insults. Instead, he buried himself. and JD Vance, calm, loyal, unwavering, rose higher than ever before. That night, nobody in America was ready to sleep. Screens glowed in truck stops, hospitals, airports, and quiet homes. A nurse in Florida paused her rounds to whisper, "This feels like the truth finally coming out." Beside her, an old veteran wiped away a tear. In the studio, Bolton sat rigid, jaw tight, eyes unfocused, while JD Vance, unshaken, became the face of a moment the nation would never forget. He had walked in ready to bury Trump with insults. Instead, it was his own credibility that lay buried. Vance didn't gloat. He sat tall, calm, his expression steady with discipline. What came next wasn't another attack, it was a plea. Turning from Bolton to the camera, he spoke directly to the people. "America, I know you're tired. I know you've seen too much corruption, too much division. But tonight proves something important. Truth still matters. Justice still matters. We cannot let bitterness and betrayal define our country. We must rise above it, because this nation is not about one man or one administration. It's about you, the people." The studio fell silent. Even Bolton lowered his gaze, unable to meet Vance's eyes. Across the country, parents hugged their children tighter. Ordinary Americans felt as if someone finally spoke for them, not at them. Many cried openly. Social media flooded with messages. "I can't stop crying. This is powerful." In that moment, the clash became a movement. Bolton looked around, realizing the crowd was no longer his. The host avoided his eyes. The audience was cold. His allies were gone. "This isn't fair," he muttered, voice weak and hollow. Vance didn't respond. He didn't need to. The silence itself told the story. Bolton had exposed himself, and nothing he said could undo it. For Vance, it became a moment of leadership America would never forget. For Bolton, the loneliest moment of his career. When Vance finally spoke again, his words were heavy, each one deliberate. Behind every classified document are human lives, soldiers in battle, diplomats overseas, families waiting at home. Mishandling those secrets isn't about papers, it's about gambling with human beings. Veterans watching at home felt a lump in their throats. A widow in Arizona whispered through tears, "Finally, someone understands." Bolton's face tightened, but he stayed silent, his hands trembling, his confidence gone. Vance pressed on. America deserves leaders who protect its sons and daughters, not leaders who cash in on them. The words struck like lightning. The audience sat frozen, the silence heavier than any applause. Bolton shifted uneasily, searching for footing. "This is political theater," he snapped, but his voice cracked. The crowd didn't buy it. Even the host leaned back, sensing the imbalance. Vance leaned forward, eyes locked on Bolton. "Political theater?" he asked calmly. "No, sir. This is your life catching up with you. The raid on your home wasn't staged, the evidence boxes weren't fake, and the millions you've taken from overseas aren't rumors. They're facts." His words echoed like hammer blows. Bolton's shoulders slumped, his gaze dropping to the floor. In living rooms across the nation, people sat in stunned silence. Some whispered prayers, others wiped tears. The feeling was overwhelming. Justice, at last, felt real. The studio audience, usually restrained, finally broke. One man stood and shouted, "We've had enough of corruption." The room erupted, applause crashing like thunder. Vance didn't gloat. He lowered his head for a moment, letting the response belong to the people. When he looked up again, his eyes carried quiet determination. "This isn't about me. It's about America, and tonight we're saying enough is enough." Social media exploded. Hashtags filled timelines. Enough is enough. Vance for truth, Bolton exposed. Bolton sat frozen, his face etched with defeat. He seemed to know there was no coming back. His sharp words had withered into trembling mutters. No one believed. Vance leaned in one last time, his voice steady but cutting. "You mocked a president you once served. You betrayed the trust of the American people. And now the truth has caught up to you. Justice isn't revenge. It's the price of dishonor." The words landed like a final verdict. Bolton's hands shook as he reached for his glass, barely steady enough to lift it. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every second of his collapse. The audience held its breath, some in shock, others wiping away tears. Bolton had been silenced, not by insults, but by undeniable truth. Vance didn't linger on Bolton's downfall. Instead, he turned to the camera, speaking from the heart. Tonight isn't about John Bolton. It isn't even about Donald Trump or JD Vance. It's about America, our families, our future. We must stand against lies, betrayal, and those who profit from our pain. His voice grew emotional. "My grandfather taught me that real strength isn't measured in titles or power. It's measured in loyalty, honesty, and sacrifice. That's what this country was built on, and that's what we must fight to protect." The studio rose to its feet, applause thundering, some with tears streaming down their faces. Across the nation, people felt something they hadn't in years: hope. In that moment, JD Vance wasn't just defending Trump. He was carrying the weight of the people who still believed in America's promise. The confrontation ended, but its impact was just beginning. Bolton slipped quietly from the studio, head bowed, while Vance sat calm and composed. News outlets declared it the most explosive live broadcast in years. Social media overflowed with clips and tears, families whispering the same words: "I'll never forget this night." JD Vance had shown America that truth could still win, that loyalty and courage could silence corruption. Viewers cried, not from despair, but relief, knowing someone was finally fighting for them. It wasn't chaos that closed the night, it was clarity. And as the cameras faded, Vance's final words lingered: "America will not be broken. We will rise together." And now, dear viewers, if this story moved you, don't just watch, be part of it. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what touched you most. Join our membership for exclusive features and become part of our family. Let's rise together, because America's story is your story.